This is Sports Jam. I'm Doug Doyle, and today we're talking about a new initiative that is recreating the experience of being an athlete with teammates, coaches, and training to reach a peak performance. But instead of on the field, we're talking about in the boardroom, business. The Post, the networking club for former athletes looking to recapture that camaraderie and teamwork from their playing days in business. The Post was co-founded, a very familiar name and face to NFL fans, former NFL quarterback Christian Ponder and Jason LaRose, the former president of North America at Under Armour. Both are here to talk about The Post. Gentlemen, thanks for joining us on Sports Jam.
Thanks, Doug. Appreciate you having us on. Here.
Christian Ponder is the CEO of The Post, and now you can't buy your way into this club. It's a special networking club. Applicants must both be either a former NCAA athlete or having 5+ years experience of professional athleticism and experience. But Christian, then there's the vetting process that begins after that, right?
Yeah, so everyone, regardless of business background, you had to be at least a college athlete. So you had to at least play at the NCAA level. We don't care about Division I, II, or III, but we weigh someone's athletic experiences or merits with their business experiences and merits. And so, if you were an 8-year pro in sports, we think that brings a unique influence and perspective and experience and expertise to the table that provides value to the network, and we'd love for those people to be a part of it. And then for those who maybe finish their sports career at the college level a little bit earlier than those who spent some time professionally, they're a little farther in their business career. And so we care about the business experiences, expertise that they bring to the table, and it creates this great mix of people learning from each other and pushing each other, just like we had in sports. We had teammates that were alongside of us, helping us to get better. And it's, you brought it up earlier, Doug. It's the same idea here. Now it's not necessarily this, about a ball on the field, but it's still a highly competitive space in business.
Christian, why did you feel The Post was necessary?
I found it a necessity to have my own experience as an athlete. My last year in the NFL was 2016. I moved to New York City in the fall of 2017 to start the business chapter of my life, which I was very excited for. And just realized that first 3.5, 4 years after football, I was dealing with this deep discontentment around the idea that I've been an athlete my whole life. It's a huge part of my identity and my story and how I operate in this world. And it didn't make sense to me that it was suddenly reduced to a past version of myself, or at least that's what it felt like. But even more important than that, what I realized is the athlete community is the community that I belong to. It's my tribe. It's my people. And for the first time in my life, I was formally removed from that group, even though I've been an athlete since I was a child, on teams and in locker rooms. And I desperately missed being a part of that community, not only because it's the people I get along with best and enjoy being around the most, but also the intangibles that athletes possess: the work ethic, the grittiness, the competitiveness, the drive, the self-accountability, the perseverance. When you're in a room where everyone's defined by those characteristics, it just makes you better. And now being removed from that room, I desperately missed it and couldn't find anything that filled that void for me or came close to replicating what I experienced in sport, being surrounded by athletes. And so out of selfish ambition of being around athletes again, we decided to go build it. And what was an idea 3 years ago took multiple years of work to figure out, okay, we had this idea, what has actually become, in reality, what has it become? And that's where Jason came into play and has been a tremendous partner behind the scenes of helping us bring this to life. And now we launched in April, it's professional network side of things, create our own clubhouse here in New York City that opened 3 weeks ago. And it's been super fun to see how quick it's come together, but we're really just getting started.
You can tell he's a former quarterback, right? You see the intensity. You can go right inside, whether it be Florida State. You can go inside that huddle, whether it be the Vikings or any of the other NFL clubs that he was associated with. He just takes over the room, right? He takes over the room because he's got that confidence and he's got that leadership ability. Jason, you also have leadership abilities too, especially when it comes to digital media and marketing and things like that. You are a perfect partner for The Post, aren't you?
Yeah, well, I mean, I hope so. Christian, I'm a little bit like, his substantially older brother. He reminds me all the time. But yeah, I mean, we're in many ways, we're the ends of the spectrum when it comes to the members that we have at the Post. For me, the athletic career as a failed walk-on baseball player, not so great. But fortunate to have worked in some great places like Under Armour and Equinox Media and otherwise, and have some some head start on some of those things. And Christian on the other side competed at, what you could argue is the hardest job in sports, being a starting quarterback in the National Football League. There are only 32 of them, and it's a pretty hard gig, right? So, for us, we're on opposite ends of the spectrum, but it's been a love affair for us. I mean, I was at Under Armour for 7 years, and it was a place built by hiring athletes, and what that meant from a culture perspective and a competitiveness was incredible. While my career ended, my brother played in the National Hockey League for 8 years and professionally for 13. And I watched his transition out and trying to find his community. And so this has just been something that's really resonated with me. And it's been a real passion project for Christian and I to bring it together.
True sports family you come from, Jason. And don't feel so bad. I was cut 2 days before the season started as a walk-on at Penn State. I have a feeling they kept me on because I was a catcher, right? You catch those 95-mile-per-hour fastballs in the winter ball, and you make the squad. You think you're going to make the team, and then Coach Shorty Stoner said to Doug, "You're as equal ability as the guy on scholarship. That means you go, he stays." So brutal. we know how that can work out. But Jason, tell us a little bit more about your role now with the Post, with all your background here. As you work with Christian, what do you want to accomplish here with not only people on the business side, but giving former athletes an opportunity to really hone their skills in this area?
Yeah, well, look, I mean, I left Equinox Media in 2021 to start this with Christian. And so we've been at this for, a little more than 2 years. And I think his original vision started close to 3 years ago. So it's been a love affair, but it's really not so much about the business. It's just really about the athletes, Doug. I mean, at the end of the day, it's about serving our community and trying to crowdsource the kinds of things that they need. So athletes in our community have said, I want access to an executive coach. So we make that partnership available and they can do some leadership assessments. We have people who just want to connect with peer groups of folks who are tackling some of the same problems, might be at the same level in their career. We have speaker series and content. Christian hosts his own podcast called Built by Sport to try to bring some of that together. But we host events, and we've got our clubhouse in New York, and we do all these things really to just try to be the grease. What people will tell athletes no matter what, and whether we're in college or professionally or otherwise, is you should network more, but nobody really tells you how to do it. And so our job is to try to give athletes a turnkey solution that you join the Post, you participate in the things that you want to, but when you come out the other side, you have a locker room, a team of people who are really dedicated to helping you be great in life after sport, who value the things that you learned on the field or in the pool or wherever that might have been. And we've been lucky to build it. So that's been the dream. I think over time, Doug, it just becomes a bigger network. And as more people are in it, it's more valuable to its members. We'll have more clubhouses. We'll have more partners who are providing services to support this community. But over time, it's really just the same race that, that we're running to just support an awesome community of people.
Christian, you mentioned just opening in New York City. Can you give us an example of somebody who has become a part of the club that, that has already changed their outlook?
Yeah. I mean, look, there's already been numerous stories. So we launched really in April, which was our national membership all across the country. We're not exclusive to New York City, but opened this first physical space. And we already have people. I think there's a lot of athletes who have an entrepreneurial bug, people who have been in corporate roles for a long time, who now say, hey, I think I potentially found my co-founder to go start my own thing through a member of the Post. We've had people who have dealt with, one specific case of a PR nightmare of sorts that got connected with another member who helped them create, had some PR help, create a better story that was in another article that was counteracting this negative hit piece. And, people who there was, two VC funds that ended up co-leading a deal together because their managing directors were members of the Post and met through the Post. And so there's already, in such a short amount of time, real tangible examples of value and, through the experience of Post members coming together. And, beyond just that, so many people already just telling us how much fun and energized they feel, that they haven't felt this way since they've been a part of a locker room in college, 15, 20, 30 years ago. And I think what's really been cool is, our youngest member is 23. We don't have a lot of members in their 20s, but our oldest member is 72 years old. And our whole idea is once an athlete, always an athlete. It always becomes so deeply ingrained into who you are and how you operate. It never leaves you. And so for someone who's in their 70s, who was a two-sport athlete in college, still wanting to be a part of this community and missing it, and you talk to so many athletes about what they miss most about playing. And even regardless of gender, 98% of the time it's some version of I miss the locker room or I miss the team, which is just another word for community. For us to just build the infrastructure for that community to come together again, even just that, there's so much tangible value for all these athletes to experience some of the things that they had experienced when they were in sport, on teams, and in locker rooms.
I would also imagine that because of the pandemic, we've been so isolated for a couple of years now. Everybody is dying to get out and meet each other and talk. And as you mentioned, a lot of people just miss that connection. So this comes at the right time for those athletes. Does it say anything about how when athletes are at the top of their field, everybody loves them, but when their careers may be over, there's the support networks aren't there. And even when you're going through college, maybe there aren't classes to help you with that either, right?
Yeah, that's right. I think, really, again, it starts from a communal standpoint. I think, athletes are so plugged into this idea of a team, and suddenly, they deal with this identity crisis where that athlete identity feels like it's all behind you. But not only that is now I'm kind of doing this all on my own around new types of people with new experiences. And I think there's also this societal misconception that athletes are a bunch of dumb jocks, and it's so far from the truth. There's actually so much compelling data around the fact that there's this, athletes have a lot of strengths when it comes to business, and there's actually a lot of data around this outperformance that athletes possess in their performance in the office space, and it's because of the qualities that they learn through sport. Some of the things that I named before, the work ethic, the grittiness, the competitiveness, the ambition, the accountability. It lends itself to really high performing metrics when it comes to performance at work. And so for us, this idea, I think, will eventually help, a lot of these athletes who are in transitioning and struggling. But I think the solve is that we're giving them this veteran locker room of sorts to be a part of, right? We're like Jason said, this turnkey solution to being a part of a network and a community and a locker room of people who are veterans in the sense that they have made that transition a while ago and know what it takes to compete at a high level in business because they've been tapping into those characteristics that they learned through sport. And now as a 21-year-old athlete who just left my college baseball career behind, I can go learn from these people. I can build relationships with these people who I have a tremendous amount in common with because of our shared experiences as athletes. And they also understand the value that I'm bringing to the table from my athletic background. And so I think, for us, it's really just, it's creating that space that's allowing athletes to continue to be exactly who they are for the rest of their life and to lean into that identity because, it's a massive asset and it's not the liability that I think a lot of us feel when sports is over.
Speaking of building relationships, Jason, as somebody who has a brother that played a long career in the National Hockey League, what kind of conversations have you had about the post with him?
Yeah, well, it's interesting that he retired in 2014. So, that same transition that Christian's talked about is one that, we talked about a lot. And there were a couple of years, I think, in there where he really struggled with some of those things, same things that Christian talked about. It's different when you transition out at the college level, right, Doug? Like you got to go get a job. So, you just sort of like go do it. But when you get done in your 30s, it's a different thing. And I think finding the identity is really important. For my brother, he's continuing to coach really successfully back in Detroit, where we're from. And he's really enjoying that. But he still misses that group. The one thing he has going for him that we don't hear all the time from our members is his identity as an athlete is still a really important part of how people value him as a coach. They look back and see a guy who won a Stanley Cup, who played a long time, and they think, I want my kid to be coached by this guy. In our world, we're talking to a lot of people who go to work and don't tell people they were athletes. They don't tell them either because people think they're bragging or because people think they're dumb. And so they don't want somebody to think that that's how you got into Penn State or that's how you got into Yale or whatever. And so they shut it down and they don't have a place to necessarily always lean into those things that are so ingrained in them. And so the post has been a great place for that. And we've heard a lot of those conversations with our members that are a little different than my brother who transitioned into a world that's still very sport.
It's interesting that both of you have brought up, many people have this idea of what athletes are about and their intellect. I talk to my sports broadcasting students all the time. It's the questions that the athletes get from the reporters sometimes that lend themselves to not great answers, because you're not asking the good questions as a reporter should. Like, well, how do you feel? You just lost. Well, how do you think I feel? Or you were supposed to make the playoffs, you didn't. What's that? How do you feel about it? These questions don't really lend themselves to a lot of thought. But fortunately, because Christian has his own podcast, we get to hear the real thoughts that are going through athletes' minds now, and not just football, off the field, and other things that are going on, family life. And it's such a big transition. But people need to know that, just because you're an athlete doesn't mean you can't contribute. And as Christian pointed out really nicely, all those leadership skills that you get, really translate when it comes to the business and many other aspects of life. For you, Jason, when you think about the post, what's the ultimate you would like to see? Now, obviously, you like to see clubs all over the U.S., I would imagine. Could this be worldwide as well?
Yeah, I think it could certainly be worldwide. I don't think the United States is the only sporting country, but we do have, between 5 and 6 million former athletes just in this country alone, NCAA or professional. So there's a huge market for it here in our country, but there are a lot of other places where it can be successful. I think the real vision in the long run is for this to be the greatest leadership network anywhere in the world. I think when you put together both the skill set of the group, but then also what binds us together. There are a lot of groups I'm a part of that I'm loosely affiliated with, but this is the only one I'm a part of where everyone there is wired like me. We don't necessarily have to share the same job title or sport or university or geography or even the same era, as Christian pointed out. But having people together who all have the same mindset is really what makes the community strong and allows people to support one another. So I think in the end, this could be the greatest leadership community anywhere in the world, just because of the lessons we learned on the fields together. And that's, I think, an incredible mission, but it's one it's never reachable. So we just keep chasing after it, and every year it'll get better and better. But great vision statements take you out 10 or 15 years, and I think that's where we are.
I bet Christian Ponder would have liked to have seen name, image, and likeness in play when he was at Florida State, right?
It would have been nice to have a little more money in my pocket. I think I got like a $640 check, $350 of that immediately went to rent. And every weekend I was living off basically $300 to get by. So it would have been nice. But I will say, it's obviously changed the dynamic of college football and even high school football or really sports in general. And I think what's really interesting over the last 4 or 5 years, it's been a massive shift between the introduction of NIL, the transfer portal rules, and now the conference realignment stuff, where it's just, I don't know what's going on. It just seems like a wild west. And I think there's and now obviously the expansion of the NFL or the NCAA playoffs coming next year, and it's just there's been a lot of change. And I think the NCAA is still clearly trying to figure out the NIL stuff and how to manage it all. And I am interested to see in a few more years, if we get a breakdown, especially in college football, some of these programs that have spent a lot of money in the NIL department and not necessarily on brands, but just getting players to come to these teams. I want to see the breakdown of like what each school paid per win. And, what was the ROI on actually those dollars spent? And I think there's going to be a lot of eyes open that like maybe this isn't the most efficient way to spend those money, especially now. 10 years ago, all those dollars were going to investing in improving, weight rooms and locker rooms and stadiums and the facilities. And that was a big part of recruiting. And now none of that money is going there. It's all going to players' pockets. And I'm interested to see how that shakes out over the next few years.
Yeah, I am too. I probably would have got about $35 for name, image, and likeness when I was at Penn State. Somebody might have paid that, a friend.
Yeah.
If I paid them off in advance.
Yeah.
Well, Doug, one of my favorite stories that Christian tells, and I'm sure it's very different now. The starting quarterback at Florida State probably makes a 6 or 7 figure NIL deal. When Christian was in school, he could have a bagel on game day before the game, but he couldn't have cream cheese because that would violate an NCAA rule on protein. So that's what we're talking about, the difference in 10 years.
It was ridiculous, right? There was on a Saturday, right? And this is for practice. If you could have a snack, but you couldn't have a meal. So like Jason said, a bagel without cream cheese is a snack. a bagel with cream cheese is a meal, and that's against NCAA violation. So, it's just like I'm glad that we've gotten past some of the illogical, non-common sense things, but it's still a lot more to be figured out here as we get through this NIL stuff.
Jason, I would imagine that those who are in the club, when you put now the post on your resume, that's going to carry a lot of weight too when somebody's looking for an executive in any type of area, right?
Well, that's the goal. I mean, I think if the brand is great and you're a part of that community and you're giving to it and receiving from it, the fact that we do interview candidates and it's not for everyone means that it's another badge, right? And we're all part of different communities, and those badges mean something. And being in this network, I think, means something for our hundreds of members right now and our thousands of members in the future. So we're excited about holding a high standard for the people who come in and deliver an experience that's premium enough that everyone really wants to tell folks that they're members. It's really hard to advertise anywhere in the world and only reach your target demographic when you're talking about athletes. Less than 3% of high schoolers go on to play a college sport. So most people don't get reached by your advertising who could be members. This is a referral-based business. These are athletes referring other people, and they only do that if they have an awesome experience. And so we're excited to be delivering it for them.
4th and goal for Minnesota. Off the fake. Ponder to the end zone. Touchdown, Kyle Rudolph.
Speaking about an awesome experience, how about for you, Christian, whether it be NFL or at Florida State, what moment do you think about most that brings a smile to your face?
Well, if you would have stopped there before saying bring a smile to my face, it's interesting. I think and Jason asked this question a lot. It's one of my favorite questions that we ask, in member interviews or even as we hire people. Do you hate winning more? Or sorry, do you love winning more or hate losing more? And I definitely hate losing more. And so if you would have stopped that question, say that brings you a smile to your face, I would have said, I think about all these interceptions that I throw that cost us the game. I definitely it's the mistakes that always keep me up at night. But going back to good memories, which I'm much happier to think about. I think, beating UF my senior year, which was the first time at Florida State that would beat UF in, I think, 8 or 9 years. And on that same night after we beat them, we found out we were going to the ACC championship game. That was a tremendous moment.
10:52 to go. Florida State moving right. Dropping back to throw. Ponder has time. Throws a fade route down the near sideline. It is caught. Smith on. Touchdown to Fish.
Oh, my goodness.
Touchdown Florida State. Ponder with a perfect pass.
And then as I think back to the Vikings, obviously, the draft night, being drafted in the first round was, not even something I had dreamed about. I think it was beyond even my own vision for myself, which was just an amazing experience. But I think, my second year, beating Green Bay in week 17, against head-to-head against Aaron Rodgers at home to make in the playoffs and winning that and going to the playoffs was really a great feat for me and a night that I'll always remember. But there's so many countless memories that I think about, whether it's more about the relationships with my teammates that I had and all the times we spent puking in trash cans at 6 a.m. together. Like, there's some unique bonds between athletes that I'll always cherish forever.
One of the best TV sports reporters out there happens to be very close to Christian Ponder, his wife, Sam. So what kind of conversations do you guys have at the dinner table?
Oh, it's wide varying. I mean, whether it's, gosh, we got to make it through another day with 3 kids. How are we going to do it? What lessons are we teaching them? But talk a lot about football. It's been great for me, especially Doug, you brought up before, just brought up, having my own podcast, picking her brain on some things, now being on the other side of me asking the questions and not being asked the questions. And she's been tremendous. And I got to say this, I wouldn't be here without her because she's taken, on her shoulders after I was done playing. She said, look, I'll be the breadwinner for the family. I'll provide for these next few years as you get this thing off the ground. And so she's been, tremendously helpful and really bringing this vision to life and pushing me to continue to want more and do better and hold me to a high level of, and standard as both a spouse, a parent, and now a CEO of a company. So it's been great.
When we can't find something specific to criticize in a quarterback like this, sometimes we just call him a system quarterback. It's the system. Yeah. I've been hearing that all week this week. When you watch him play, what are you seeing?
Did you ever think that she would outlast you in the NFL?
I get that question a lot. On Twitter especially. Hey, Samantha Punder's had a longer NFL career than Christian. So thanks for pointing out, Doug. But yeah, she's really great at her job. I mean, she grew up, around a coach. She played sports her whole life. I think one of her biggest assets is her ability to connect with every member on her team, from Randy Moss to Rex Ryan to Teddy Bruschi. I mean, I think she makes everyone feel comfortable, and she's very informed, and she works her butt off during the week. What no one sees on the screen is all the work that she's put in during the week, watching all the games, taking notes. She writes the whole show based off of the things that they're gonna, the hits they're gonna talk about throughout the whole show. And so she's really good at her job. So it's been cool to see that side of her and get the behind the scenes look.
Jason, as a marketing guru, and tying in what we were talking about athletes, how about when you would talk about Alan Page, what he did with his life after football? Is there somebody that you want to point out that's in the post to give us an example of who you're working with and just what kind of goods he or she has?
Well, look, I mean, we don't generally, roll out our Rolodex of members. We certainly have some members who've been public about it. So, I'll share a couple of those. Allison Felix is a member, maybe the greatest sprinter we've ever had in our country. I don't know how she holds her neck up when she puts all the medals around, but now is running her own running brand. And so, in Sage, and that's been great. And she and her brother Wes, who ran track at USC, they're both members, and they've shared a lot of great insights with our members about what it's like to start a company from scratch and to take on some of the behemoths in the industry, including one that I used to work for. And, I think that's been really interesting. But, Jacob Trouba is a member who's the captain of the New York Rangers. And Jacob's in our clubhouse the other night, not really talking about ice hockey. He was talking about his art installation because, that was just featured in the New York Times. And Jake has been kind enough to loan some of his awesome pieces to us in our first clubhouse in New York. And he's thinking a lot about what life after hockey is going to look like, because it doesn't go on forever, right? Father Time is undefeated, whether he gets you at 25 or 35, or maybe if you're Tom Brady, 45, I guess. But no matter what, you have a lot to give afterward. And those are the conversations that we have with our members now, whether they're unknown people like me who are really, forging ahead in the business world, or people like Christian who competed at a really high level and are doing awesome things afterward. It's just great to get this group together and talk about how we can build great things in life whenever there isn't a game on the schedule tomorrow, or that game on the schedule is probably chasing a 6-year-old of our own instead of doing it ourselves. And that's just as rewarding for sure.
A lot of people will blast social media for the negative side, but when you think about the opportunities that it has given former athletes, whether it be digital or social media platforms like a podcast for you, Christian, you get the sense that now we can have more people giving their thoughts and opinions, and we really enjoy that, because it's one of the beauties that I love of this show, Christian, is getting to know people like you and Jason on a more personal level than just, hey, he was a former quarterback, hey, he was a former CEO or a marketing manager, or whatever. Obviously, there's more opportunity now, right, through the whole digital platform.
Yeah, there definitely is. And I think there's been a lot of athletes who've taken advantage of that, of, whether they just, hop on Instagram Live and host a Q&A session, or they host their own podcast. A lot of people obviously spending a lot of time building their brand outside of sports, and a lot of people putting more of their business hat on. I think it's been a compliment to a lot of the leagues and coaches, where 15 years ago, all of that would have been deemed a distraction, and it's going to take away from your ability to play well on the field or the court or whatever. And I think now, a lot of people are on the other side of that and see the value of athletes spending more time focusing on the business side of it. And for us, I think, even from my own experiences, I think there's no better time for athletes to start transitioning out of sport, or thinking about what they're going to do off the field or court, or just outside of sports, than why they're still doing it. And I think that idea, like you brought up, the getting to know these athletes, not just as a football player, a basketball player, a hockey player, whatever's under the helmet, but now, outside of sport, there's a lot of really interesting people with a lot of really interesting backgrounds, and a lot of smart people that we can all learn from. I think that's what's great about athletes. I think this understanding that, number one, there's always an opportunity to get better, but number two, there's always something to learn from other people. And I think we experience that on an everyday basis, whether learning from our coach or our teammates on how to get better. And being able to learn from people who we might not be able to learn from because of our access is definitely a big advantage of the social media and podcast era that we're in.
We just have a couple of minutes left here on Sports Jam. Jason, you're joining us from Maryland. If you could go back in time to any sporting event, maybe take your brother, maybe take the family, where would you go and why?
Ooh, that's a good question. As a Detroit kid, I'd probably go back and see the 1968 World Series. The Tigers won the World Series against the Cardinals in 7 games. Mickey Lolich not only won 3 games on the mound, but he also hit a home run, which was pretty rare for an American League pitcher at those times. So pretty incredible, in the face of Bob Gibson, one of the few greatest pitchers of all time. So I would have loved to see that, but not only because it was a special moment in Detroit and it bonded a lot of people together who are older than me, but it was also at a time when there was a lot of racial tension in Detroit. There had been riots, and really, I think the Tigers were a big part of healing the city, bringing people together. And I think that that's something that has really shaped a lot of people in my parents' generation in particular. And I would love to see that sort of bond for a city, and I would have loved to be a part of that.
Same question for you, Christian, whether it be with Sam and the kids, or where are you going and why?
Yeah, I think, I grew up very much, watching football. My dad played football at Florida State. My mom went there. We grew up a football family. I didn't have that much appreciation for basketball growing up. Now I'm married in a basketball family. I play a lot of basketball, in my free time. And so I, obviously early in the pandemic, one of the greatest gifts was The Last Dance coming out on Netflix. And I think something everyone rallied around. And so I just wish I could go back and just go see Michael Jordan live, in his prime, and seeing the artistry and mastery that he presented on the court, and learning just from his leadership style. I mean, I think what was so unique to him is not only did he hold himself accountable, but he found a way to hold everyone else accountable, to a really high standard on his team. And that's what made the Chicago Bulls, one of the most successful franchises during that time ever. And so to go witness that in person and actually have an appreciation for it, I think would have been a great opportunity.
As a poor kid from Detroit, I saw that. It was from the nosebleeds. He hung 50 on the Pistons. It wasn't that fun. So,
from a Pistons perspective.
That's right.
Well, as we wrap up this edition of Sports Jam, I started, as both of you were answering, think, well, if I asked myself this question, what would it have been? I guess it would have been 1972. We just lost recently the man who supposedly made the catch off the field. That would be Franco Harris going for a touchdown, because in Pittsburgh that game was blacked out. So as a young kid, I heard it on the radio, and I was a cynic back then. I said, "Where's the flag? Where's the flag?" I was only 10 years old, and I expected a flag to be thrown as I was listening on the radio. I was also at the Bush push game, Notre Dame and USC, in the opposite end zone. So rooting for Notre Dame that day. We thought we had won because you're in the opposite end zone, so you don't see flags and everything else. And then now that has changed football dramatically, and could lead to more rule changes coming up. But it's been a pleasure talking to both Christian Ponder and Jason LaRose about their new venture, The Post. You'll definitely want to check that out, as well as Christian's new podcast, Built by Sport. You're not competing with me, are you, when it comes to
I'm not. Well, look,
you probably have more listeners and viewers than I get in
Doug,
20 years.
To your benefit, first of all, you're way better at your job than I am when it comes to being a podcast host. But our podcast is only for our members. So right now it's an internal podcast where our members get to hear me talk about random stuff. But it's we're not in competition yet. Now it could be, we could maybe do a public podcast here in the next year, and I'll be coming after you, Doug. But right now it's a members only podcast for the time being.
I think you're already there, Christian. So thanks to both of you for getting us up to date on The Post. It's really great to hear that things are happening for those who maybe didn't get all the opportunities they needed because they were athletes, and maybe even marketing business people coming together and making a difference on The Post. Thanks a lot for joining us on Sports Jam.
Great to be with you, Doug. Love the show.
Of course.
Sports Jam is a WBGO Studios production. You can hear all the past shows by going to WBGO.org/sportsjam or WBGO.org/studios. You can also find Sports Jam with Doug Doyle on the NPR list of podcasts or wherever you hear podcasts. Until our next Sports Jam session, I'll see you at the game.